Let's not look at that one. Let's look at this one. So just a quick review before we get into looking at all the cool things you guys pulled up. Basically, we shared some core. There are many more. We could have like a list of 100 different principles, and you guys should be probably creating your own list of things that you think are important, or the kinds of visualization tricks or guidelines or guideposts that you guys like. But these are some general ones that have worked well over the years. And so just a quick refresher, we want to always show the data as much as we can. We want the viewer to think about the data. Very, very common when you guys are doing your capstone, when you guys are doing your, starting off on your academic journey, you're like, oh my God, I put all this time into measuring the whale or whatever. I want to tell people how I measured the whale. People don't care about how you measured the whale, right? So you want to have that in the methods. People might want to go back and look at that. But the first thing they should see is the data, not how you constructed the design and all the great work you did and how many times you tried and didn't work. They don't care about that. Just show the data. Obviously, we want to avoid distorting the data in any way, shape, or form. We want to present it truthfully. Generally speaking, the more numbers, the more data, the higher the data density is usually a stronger graph. But when we do start to get multiple things going on, we really need to work hard to make sure that the visualization has some coherent messaging, same colors, same symbols, whatever the case may be, that sort of carries through and makes it easier for the viewer to look at stuff. Again, the general thing with a lot of our visualizations is to try to show people a relationship so they can compare A to B or whatever. And so the design of our visualization should help people make those visualizations. And then, things get a little more, some of this is learn to walk before, or learn to crawl before we walk, learn to walk before we run. But once we start to get some of these muscles going, generally speaking, multiple levels of detail make the visualization richer, and you can do more with it. And we always want to have a clear purpose. So there might be a lot of data there. There might be multiple ways people could see stuff, but there should also be a big overarching takeaway, a big picture, big clear purpose. We're focusing on the graphical visual elements here to start with, but also when we get to writing, again, the visuals should reinforce the writing should reinforce the visuals, but you should be able to get at least the most important core messages just from the text without looking at any figure. And you should be able to look at the figure without looking at any text to get the core big takeaways, right? That's, and then when you have both together, they're reinforcing and they're even that much better, but they should each be able to stand on their own. And there's all kinds of other things we talk about, but ultimately, elegant, right? We'd like it to be aesthetically pleasing. We'd like it to be great. And that really gets into personal taste, right? And personal, interpretations of stuff and what you like and other people like. So a class like this is fantastic for once we start getting into you guys making presentations to show it to a bunch of people. And even though you think it's the neatest color scheme ever, when you show it to other people, like, that's ugly. I can't see that, right? That sort of check on elegance, which you think is elegant versus what the general consumers are, is great. And then one other one that I forgot to mention, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned to you guys before we start looking at your graphs. Data, the word data is plural, right? So that's many. So there's multiple things. If we're talking about a single thing, a single point, a single measurement, that's a datum, right? So data, when we just say data, that's by default, that's plural. So we're meaning multiple items. And I think I forgot to mention that before. Cool. All right. Anybody have any questions on that introductory lecture that we recorded because we were virtualized? Okay. All right. So let's take a look. How do I make this guy do slideshow? All right, cool. So looks like most everybody has this up, and that's great. So we thought we'd just run through and start one of our first exercises, which is just to have you guys look at some of the compilations of your fellow students, and we can talk about them. So this is our first exercise of doing stuff where we get feedback from everybody. Everybody here is cool. Everybody here has ideas. critiquing people is not bad. We have taken this term, a lot of us have, that critiquing is negative or critiquing is bad. No. Critiquing is giving people feedback, right? And when we first start this, everybody will say things like, "Oh no, that's good. I like it. That's good. That's a good graph, right?" Even though it's a crappy graph, because you don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to hurt their feelings, right? Nobody here is trying to hurt anybody's feelings. And all of our comments are given not to be mean or to be harmful, but to get you better, right? So that's the spirit that they're going to be given in. That's the spirit you should take them in, right? And so if everything is all great and perfect, you shouldn't be in school. There's nothing to learn. You're not going to get any better, right? But it's with those critiques. And sometimes you put a lot of time into them and you're like, this is my best graph ever. And people are like, that sucks. And that's sort of hard to take. But ultimately, that makes us a better student, a better learner, and in this case, a better figure maker, a better grapher. Cool? Okay. So as you guys saw, we have stuff's broken down, and a couple things here just to remember, or if you guys were having a hard day and forgot what we're doing. So the idea here is you guys are giving us two examples, a good example, a bad example, an effective visualization, a less effective visualization. And you're also saying we want to get in the habit of always attributing stuff. So where did I get the data from? If you guys are making the figure, or if we're looking at a figure that's been produced by someone else, where did you get the figure from, right? And that separates us from the silly people on barking social media and all that kind of stuff, right? We want to be transparent. We want to show everything all the time. So if someone is not sure if we fully visualize it they could go back and look at the original source, right? Or if there's some question about that figure, we can go back to the original paper and find it, right? So that principle should serve us throughout the course and hopefully throughout your career. So when you guys do give us stuff, remember to always make sure you're grabbing the source of it. It's just a default thing. Okay, so we'll start off, and so I'll do the first two since my two are examples here, and then we're just going to rock through these guys. We don't want to take the whole time up because we have other things to get to, but we'll go through some of these. If it just has taken a while, we'll just sort of pause it and pick this up next, on Thursday. But want to sort of get introduced to this approach, right? And so what's going to happen is, if it's your figure, why don't you guys stand up so people can see you? And again, since we're start of the semester, why don't we say our names so everybody can help learn our names? Because some of us know each other, but not all of us do. So go ahead and introduce yourself real quick. It's your first thing. And then say, okay, so this is my effective graph, and this is why I liked it, or this is why I think it's an effective use of blah, 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 right? And then the same with your ineffective graph. So you guys are welcome, if you look at that, you guys are welcome to give them to comment as well. So obviously they didn't make this figure, but you're like, oh yeah, I can see, or the other problem I see, or the thing I like about that, and just start to have a little bit of a dialogue around this. Cool? Sound good? Okay, so I'll go first. So here is one of my so I'll stand up. So hey, I'm Dr. A, so I've stood up and I'm projecting my voice so everybody can hear me, hopefully. So this is my effective graph, I think. So this is from a source a long time ago, before probably some of you guys were born. And what we're showing here is the population of 2 fish in a lake, and it's the fishing effort. So you guys don't have to do this on all your figures, but when it gets to your final presentation, it's a good idea also to orient people to your figure. So if you're doing a poster presentation, just a little quick blurb. But anyway, what I like about this is it's showing the abundance of the red fish and the abundance of the blue fish. It's very, I think it's very easy to see, and there's a clear pattern. There's a time period where the red fish, in this case is a yellow perch, is abundant, and then that guy goes away, and the rainbow smelt, the blue fish, comes to become dominant in the area. So I think this is an effective way of just showing the shift in these two, over time of these two species. Cool? Thoughts? Other thing, and it's okay if you guys disagree. If someone puts up this is my effective graph, and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. You can say that, that's cool, and vice versa. But in general, would you guys say effective, ineffective? Any thoughts on this, Ryan?
I have no thumbs up.
Oh, okay, okay, cool. So it's just like that, right? And also I should say, by way of introducing this, since it's our first time, in some cases there might be one aspect of the figure that you really like, or there might be one dimension that's really effective, and you can go ahead and talk about that. But recall we said that everything, there's no such thing as a perfect graph, right? It's just like writing. We're always getting better. We could always make it tighter. We could always make it a little bit clearer. We could always make it a little bit, more elegant, that kind of stuff. So everything can always be improved. And so you could argue that overall the figure is effective, or overall the figure is ineffective, but still, in most cases, there's still some good and bad in every figure. So it's okay if you guys want to point out, if I say this is good and you guys want to point out one of the weaknesses or something, that's cool. Or a better way to say is not so much the weakness, but how we could make it better, how we could revise it to get it even tighter. Cool? Okay, so that's my effective graph. Then here's my ineffective graph, and you will be sick of me saying this. I hate pie charts. I loathe pie charts, and then I really, really dislike pie charts, and then I want to stab all the pie charts I see. So I am not a fan of pie charts. But so this is a pie chart, so it's an easy one for me to say I can't stand it. But I think this is a horrible figure. So first and foremost, you guys probably can't even tell what it's about, right? There's some numbers, but other than the numbers, it's not really clear what's going on here. Separate from that, it kind of gives you a brain seizure to stare at it. It's a little bit disturbing. There's some slices that appear to be the same color, so not entirely sure what's up with that. And then just completely separate from all of even if what those previous things I said were not correct, just physically the layout on the paper, stuff is on top of each other, and we can't read all the text, and it's just horrible stuff. Cool. Comments about that one? Okay, and I'll just say, before I turn over to our first one, I'll say the reason why, does anybody want to say why they think I hate pie charts so much?
They don't really say the information outright. They tend to require a little bit of explanation. And when you're dealing with the ratio of a 360, data gets skewed because it's got to fill that 360. So
that's the main reason. Yes, so the main reason is when I show this up, and it's not you guys, it's all of us. It's by nature. When we look at the like this pink wedge guy here, and we want to compare it to something, they're theoretically they're kind of okay if it was like 75% to 25%, if it sort of came out as one of those kind of things, but they never come out that way. But this is more typically how people use pie charts, which is there's many numbers in there, and how this is actually made is not how you see it. And there's been all kinds of perceptive psychological studies that show this. You and I perceive this as to how much the bright pink slice is based on the area, based on the total area of the pie wedge. That's not how this is made. This is made based on the angle. So how much of an arc that part of the display makes. So it's very difficult for us to estimate if one pie slice is half the size of another pie slice or 1/5 the size. So for us estimating and kind of saying, oh, that's like twice as much as, it's almost impossible in a pie chart. Whereas a bar chart, other visualizations, it's much easier for you to do that estimation. Remember, one of the things we said is so that people can do their own interpretation. This makes it difficult for people to interpret, especially if there's many things and especially if the differences are subtle. So for those reasons, I don't like pie charts. Okay, all right, great. So with that, let us go on to you guys. Okay, so I think Angelica's first. So Angelica, why don't you stand up and tell us about your figure?
My name's Angelica A, and this bar graph is of each bar, you can see exactly how much sightings there are.
Cool. All right, I like it. Any other comments or feedback? So a great technique is to both visually show it, and then if it works out space-wise, add that, adding that number. Now it's really, very easy for people to take it exactly that August is the peak month for those guys. Cool. All right, and then how about this guy?
This one is how mantaries socialize in band, but I don't like how it's cluttered and it's kind of hard to read it.
Okay, so we've said like data density is good, but data density when it's stuff's just sort of on top of each other and maybe not as well laid out for the audience, that can maybe just be confusing at times.
Party going on. They're all over the place.
Yeah, it is a manta ray party.
Association rate.
Cool. All right, great. Excellent. Okay, Jade, I think, is next.
Hi, my name is Jade, and this graph is supposed to be the global energy use by source, and why I picked this one is the colors were pretty concise on what was what, and it's not like there's one color that's like, this is a shade of blue, this is
Right.
a lighter shade of blue. It shows you what's coal, what's oil, what's natural gases, and what other sources of energy are being used globally, and it also tells you by the ton of oil equivalents and the
Cool.
years from 1965 to 2013. So
Cool.
that's my effective graph.
Excellent. Any comments? Any thoughts? Okay, cool. How about ineffective? Wow, another brain seizure one.
Yeah,
That's good.
This one's definitely a brain seizure, along with like half a pie chart and I throw up. And I think this one's super ineffective because you, on face value, you don't know what's going on at all. But on the very, very bottom, in very small font, it's what makes a prize-winning novel, and you still can't figure out what makes a prize-winning novel and what novels are. So I think altogether it is too much and too small. So that's my ineffective one.
There you go. Okay, I agree. I think that is that kind of looks like a Star Trek display screen or something. But as far as pulling any data out of there, it seems like a cool piece of art, but I don't know if that's really helpful data-wise. Cool. Awesome. Okay, Angelica.
Hi, I'm Angelica C. So this is my effective graph chart. I really liked it because it's nicely labeled and it has clear communication of what exactly is going on. It's about coral bleaching, and you can see the correlation of the positive and negatives of the coral bleaching efforts in the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so again, like sometimes we always want to run to color, but there should be a reason for color, right? And if it's just sort of A or B or in or out, you could just do the same with just shading or filled or not filled kind of bars. So that's cool. That's good. Any other thoughts? Okay, cool. And how about this guy?
So this is, to me, an ineffective model, mainly because it's not clearly labeled of what exactly it is. So like, when I first saw it, I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then it was mainly just the labeling. The colors, some of them are kind of mixing into each other, and then
Yeah.
the pie graph, it's kind of all over the place to me.
Yeah, okay, good. Now I would say that with the color, this is a tough one, right? So in some cases, it's nice to have a gradual color ramp to go from like really, really red or dark to really, really blue or light or whatever it is. And sometimes, depending on the data visualization, that can be really, really effective. Versus other times, like what Jade showed, is like when you have a very different color, it's more helpful to sort of, okay, that's that category and that's that category. So a lot of times for these things, you really have to go through, make the figure and just see. Like, hey, let me try a gradual ramp. Does that work? Maybe not. Let me try the other one. And so there aren't necessarily always principles that work 100% of the time. So a lot of times you might want to do, it's like going to the eye doctor and he's like, A or B? A or B? And sometimes A or B is very clear, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should totally do it this way. In other cases, it's like, gosh, I can't really tell which one's better. And that's where asking our buds really can help. Do you like the figure this version, or you like to figure this version? So cool. All right, great. Awesome. Thank you. Next is David.
Hello, I'm David. I chose this imagery because I thought the first thing was elegance. I kind of liked that it kind of had like an elegant simplicity to it. Also, I thought that as I was looking at it, it kind of made me start asking good questions.
Cool.
In my own head. So
Cool.
I thought that was like a go-to sign that this is good data imagery,
Uh-huh.
and it's making you ask questions that propel you into the research.
Good. Awesome.
And that's only up till 2021, so it's a lot.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, good. Yeah. So the bins. So excellent comment about how large that bin. Good. And so we should also just say that while maps can be a super effective way to make a visualization, GIS is not a prerequisite for this class. And so depending on the assignment or the whatever, you may choose to make a map for your data visualization, but we're not going to focus on that because that we have a whole class on that. But if you want to go down that route, we're not going to stop you, but we're not going to emphasize map making in this, since again, that's the one class where we have a whole dedicated curriculum just to that. But by all means, you guys can use maps. We're just not going to emphasize it in our training in this class. But excellent. Okay, and then you're ineffective.
Yeah. What's special about this pie chart is that it's a representative time. So the pie slices don't even really. They represent time and also the size of the fires themselves. So just to that point where it's not only just an angle, but it's also representative of time. I thought that was like, why are you using it?
It's all of a sudden we're going back in time. That's good. That's powerful. I wish I could go back in time. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
So I guess it was trying to get at is that it's more, fires are getting bigger recently compared to 1932, but I just felt there was a big gap there, and it was from Cal Fire too, so I thought that was also interesting. What were they really trying to message here?
Yeah.
How was this made?
This might be one of my new favorite, horrible examples of a pie chart. That's great. I like it. This time is circular. That's great. I like
it.
it.
Makes no sense that it goes to 21 back into 19.
There you go, baby. Living the dream. Living the dream. All right, cool. Excellent. Great. Thank you, David. That's great. Okay, Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I like this graph as my effective graph because it explains what each of the codes mean in
Uh-huh.
pretty great details. It's showing the amount of invasive species found both in the eastern coast and in the waters of North America, and it's also dividing up for time, and all the buckets for the time are the exact same. They're all covering 30 years.
Cool.
I also just like the codes they use because it does remind me of the water.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, so sometimes where we can use the coloration or the symbols that kind of reinforce it's a water thing or it's a fire thing or whatever. We can't always do that, but when that works out, that's a nice happenstance. That's sort of a little bit of extra elegance and stuff. And then another thing, just to comment, sometimes the actual layout will depend on our data. So in this particular case, the data kind of start very low on the lower left, and then they go up as we go to the right. And so this sort of says the natural place to put a legend is in the upper left, right? And so that's cool. If the data were reversed, or the way it came out when we visualized it were reversed, we would maybe want to put the figure somewhere else. And so sometimes the layout will be dictated by, we might have an idea and we take a stab at it and then we see how the data plays out, like, oh no, maybe I should change. But in this case, this is a very nice sort of obvious choice for where to put the legend, the way the data played here. Okay, cool. Oh, sorry, yeah, William, yeah.
Oh, I was gonna ask a question
Sure.
to you about this. Wouldn't this also though be skewed data because it's comparison between non-native invertebrates in European coast and North American coast, but North America is exponentially bigger than the European coast?
Yeah, great. So great question. So it depends on what the hypothesis was, right? So if the hypothesis was just simply invaders in Europe versus invaders in North America, and that was the hypothesis, this would be the right way to do it. So you're right in terms of the interpretation. You're like, oh, maybe that wasn't a fair comparison. But if the hypothesis just simply said this area versus that area, this would be okay. But that's a perfect example of if it just said, site A, site B, we wouldn't be able to do that. But because we have the extra information contained in the visualization, then you can start to say, hey, is that really right? What if we standardize for invasion per square mile or linear kilometer or something like that? So that's good. That's good. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, another thing that comes up is we get this a lot with just states, right? So like the number of species in California is going to be way more than most states, right? Especially when it comes to plants or whatever. But when it comes to like management, so if we're like putting it in context of what U.S. Fish and Wildlife or what California Fish and Wildlife have to manage, it doesn't really matter what size of the area is, right? It's more of like a unit, so it's a collective as a whole. So like Dr. A was saying, it depends on what the question is. Usually when there is that case though, when it's good that you're thinking that way, because if like the question is looking at per like area, but it's not, it's not accounting for area, because it's really easy to do those calculations, then that can be heavily skewed. So it's good that you're thinking that way.
Yep. Good. Okay, and then how about ineffective?
This is my ineffective graph. Honestly, it took me a while to figure out what in the world it was about. So I was on a site about the World Register for like new species.
Okay.
That year, I guess. And it was just really confusing because half of the stuff is overlaid. Like if you look close,
Yeah.
you can see
Yep.
underneath the other one like the mapping of
Yep.
the past one. It's just really confusing. And then like at the left side, all the dates or years merged together.
Yep.
So, and then you just don't know how many numbers are in each section because again, it's just overlays. So it's hard to tell what number it actually is at.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so this looks like maybe it wants to be a logarithmic scale on the x-axis, but it doesn't even look like it's logarithmic when you actually, it looks like it's sort of logarithmic. So there's something funky going on there. And this is another perfect example of what we talked about, which is maybe if green, whatever the hell green is, notes, or dark green, sorry, attributes, maybe if attributes was always more numerous than what's blue, distributions, maybe this would have been a little bit okay, right? If the way it played out, there was always, this guy was always the largest number, and then this one was the second largest, and this was the third. But that's not what happens, right? It switches. And so, good try, maybe good first draft, but this is not, we need to revise this. And this is hiding some of the data. Remember we mentioned we want to always show all the data? The visualization style here and format ends up obscuring some of the patterns, at least in some parts of the distribution. So that's a big fail. And then again, just like we saw before, the ability to read it is also impacted, right? So again, even if this is the best figure in the world, that x-axis, some of the labels are literally on top of each other and nobody can read that. So even if we were 1 inch away from the screen, we couldn't tell what that is. So yeah, this is a great, horrible graph.
Yeah. Something to think about. So one thing I'm going to try to kind of harp a lot throughout this semester is for us to start thinking about inclusivity on all the graphs that we're making. And so there's a couple things here, right? There's just, font size or the types of fonts. It is very difficult for people to read certain types of fonts. But if you're colorblind, what's the issue with this one? Red, green are right on top of each other, right? So it might be one thing where, if you do have a graph that has tons of different colors, I'm kind of neutral on that. I like colors. We use them in the house. I like my art. But I try to make my figures as simple as possible. And you've kind of seen that theme, right? A lot of the ones that we've said are really effective are like really basic because it's really easy to read them. But if you do go color, and sometimes you're forced to use the reds and greens and stuff, you definitely don't want them to be right on top of each other. Right? That's just one big bar to anybody that has color blindness. So try to think about that. And we'll give you some resources too of trying to find different color palettes that are, for colorblind accessibility.
And I'll tell my quick colorblind joke. This is when I went up to do my postdoc, and how my postdoc works was I was with this big famous guy with all these famous people, and we'd have a weekly lab meeting, and a few people would be picked each week to present their results, and everybody would give feedback and say this stuff. So I was really nervous the first time I was presenting to all these people, and it was like the former head of the EPA of Mexico was there, and just all these people were in the room. So and it was about restoration, and it was about how successful my restoration was going. And so I had basically three lines. I had the sucks, doesn't go well, the is kind of doing okay, and then is doing great. In the sucks, I made it red because that was bad, right? And the one that's doing great, I made it yellow, and that's great. And then the one that's great, I made it green, so green is great, go. And then the one that was kind of just in between was yellow. And it was a line chart, and so there were 3 lines. And so I gave it to my technician. I practiced several times, like, yeah, it's great, it's great. So we go up and I give my talk and everything, and I finish up, and then my postdoc advisor raises his hand, and he goes, go back to graph 10, or whatever the hell it was. I'm like, oh, okay. I go back, he goes, what the hell's that? And I was like, what? I started getting super nervous. I started sweating. I'm like, what? Well, it's success. No, I know you said it's successful. What the hell's that? I wasn't sure what he was at. I'm like, well, it shows right there, dude. Are you dumb? Can't you see what it says? And I was like, I don't understand. He goes, I can't tell which is a successful one. I was like, oh, the successful one is the green one. I go, do you know how many American males are colorblind? And I was like, wait, no, this is about restoration. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I know it's about. Anyway, so long story short, he's like, you dumbass, why did you make it red and green? I cannot tell the difference between the red and the green. I'm like, oh, sorry, that's really bad. He's like, fix it next time. I'm like, yes, sir. So we go back, and then everybody's laughing at me. Oh, you dumbass, right? And then I go back to my lab, and I'm talking to my technician, and I'm like, oh man, I really wish, that we're talking about. He goes, oh yeah, I couldn't tell the difference between the red or the green either. I'm like, what? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm colorblind. I was like, what? I know the guy for 7 years. I'm like, what? And like, you didn't tell me? He's like, oh, I thought everybody else could see the difference. So I thought I didn't need to tell you. I was like, you let me walk into the lines then? So because of that, I'm very sensitive about red and green colorblind. But okay, that's my story. Okay, I'll be quiet. All right, awesome. Okay, William, tell us about your effective graph.
All right, hello, I'm William. This is my effective one. I used this graph in Dan Redmond's class last semester, talking about the rocky intertidal zone. And I was just discussing how the sea surface temperature around the islands changed the population distribution. And so this was in one of the articles that I was using, peer-reviewed articles, and I thought it was really cool because it very clearly shows you the difference in the sea surface temperature. And it looks like it's extensively different temperatures, but it's by Celsius, so it's really only a couple degrees Fahrenheit in difference between the islands. So I think San Miguel's around, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and Anacapa's in 60 degrees. But that greatly changed what was found in those areas, and so I just thought it was really clearly shown what the temperature was and the difference between all 4 of the main islands.
Yeah, and this is a good use of that very fine scale gradation in color. So we don't need to know exactly what the temperature is at point X and Y in here, but rather the idea is show the big picture, the big pattern. So it becomes really easy to see where the hot spots or where the concentration of those values are around a certain island or on a certain part of the map. So that's cool.
This is one thing. So you can say with colorblind, right? There's red, green, and there's blue, yellow, right? And so the one difference is, and I've kind of one of my closest friends is colorblind, so I've kind of learned. He's taught me all of his little tricks and how he grew up and stuff, even just with red light, green lights at stop signs, right? They learn differently. They've kind of grew up. We've always had these kind of gradients, especially with rainbows, so they can tell with those transitions, right?
Yeah.
So you can see where you have red and then it goes to yellow and then there's green. those will look the same to them, but they know that it's a gradient because there's that separation and break in it. And so it's the same thing with the blue yellows, right? There's color gaps in between, so they can tell that there's some kind of gradient, and so they know that those are different colors. So that's why this would be like, okay, you know, like they would still be able to kind of get the gist, with it.
Which,
Cool.
Anthony,
Oh, sorry.
That comes right after.
Yeah.
some of the color
Cool.
ones, so.
Okay.
And this is my ineffective one. This was also in Dan Randman's class, is that me and a couple students were supposed to relay what we learned about the Channel Island foxes. And this was one of the graphs in it. And I didn't understand what the heck it was about. And I showed it to Dan Randman. He didn't understand what the heck it was about. And it took Dan Randman, me, and the other two students a whole week before we fully understood what this graph is saying. But once you realize what it's saying, it's very data dense and very informative of what it's talking about. But the fact that it has zero description and it just throws it on there, it made it very hard. What it is saying is it's talking about the restoration efforts of the Channel Island foxes. And on the left side, it's talking about the mortality rate, so how many foxes are dying, I believe annually. And the bottom is the population size. And so then the red dots are the documented rate between the two, and the boxes in the circles, which we had no clue what they were, but we found out were the standard deviation and standard error. And the colored lines are the extinction rate. So as you can see, as the years go on, in 2011, 2013, there was around 500 foxes on Santa Rosa with less than 0.1 mortality rate, which means they're below the 5% extinction rate. So it's very informative once you know what it's about, but we had no clue, and it took us a whole week before we understood what it was trying to tell us.
Cool. Okay, good. Yeah, so something could be contain a lot of information but be difficult to interpret, right? I think that's a take home from there. Cool. Excellent. All right, good. Any other comments on that one? Okay, maybe we'll do one more and then we'll switch to starting to talk about Kale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kale.
cool.
So hi, my name is Kale. This graph I got from a documentary called Seaspiracy. So it talks about how the population of like sharks, different species of sharks have changed from 1970 to today due to like overfishing. And so there are some like flaws in it. So it's like it shows really well like the big drastic change, but it doesn't have like any like dates, which you don't really like need in the context, but that's all right. It doesn't really have any percentage changes over here on the side. So those are like some flaws, and it also has oh yeah, all these are like the same color if you wanted to distinguish like which you know, lines are for which sharks.
Cool.
But I wanted to choose this one because it was like when I saw it, like I understood it immediately, and it like had like a lasting effect on me. When I saw we had our assignment, I immediately just looked up Seaspiracy shark graph, and then
Cool.
this came up.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it had a lasting effect on me.
Yeah, so this is great. I would say that generally speaking, having images behind our figures are usually not helpful, and that's often because they're distracting, or the diversity of color, you know, like the black white or the dark light or whatever, actually can obscure some of the data points. In this case, it is a picture, but it's not like an overwhelming picture, right? It's not like a forest of trees where there's all these pixels everywhere. And it's an interesting picture in that it's showing that shark swimming away, kind of giving the impression of leaving, kind of thing. So I think this would be a case where I don't think that necessarily detracts from the image, whereas sometimes those pictures tend to. Yeah, Ryan.
The outlines of sharks are very helpful as well.
Going, right?
Yeah, totally. Good. Other thoughts? Other suggestions? Or okay, cool. And how about our ineffective one?
Yeah, this took me a while to figure out. I still don't really understand. I went to the website and it was answering like 4 different or 5 different like hypothesis questions. One was about the documentary, another one was about overfishing. It's like kind of a pie chart, and there's like little parts coming out, and there's no legend there, so it's just a trash graph, honestly. There's nothing good about it.
There you go.
Yeah, you can't even read the writing, like it's just horrible.
I will say that there are different. Okay, thanks, man. That's good. Suggestions or feedback about that. So I will say that there is a time and place sometimes for making, say, a figure like this. And so sometimes a figure is meant to be consumed as, I don't know, like a reference for the next 100 years or something like, an archive of stuff and all this and that. So there are some times when we want to make a really, really simple graph and sometimes maybe a much more complicated graph. But our default condition when we ask you guys to make an assignment or whatever is going to be for, so think of it as making a presentation to Professor Spies or me or professional colleagues, that kind of stuff. So something this dense is generally speaking not going to be what we're looking for, right? So we like data density. I said that, but even though we could imagine a context where this would be some kind of reference thing, we might go and look up or something like on a dial. This is not our typical audience, right? We want people to look at it and pretty much take away the key takeaway. And from this, I'm like, am I supposed to fish for truth? Am I supposed to look at number 1 and then number 2 and then number 3? So it just is. It doesn't pass that test. Did you want to say anything?
I find these types of figures, like, the two things are going on. One, they want to confuse you. And so usually they'll have some kind of big message on the top with the words. So it's, like a big take-home fishing for truth, right? Which, you can get some impression with that. And then they just want to kind of, like, scramble your brain and you just kind of like assuming that they know what they're talking about, because clearly they just made this like really complicated like graph, so obviously they know what they're talking about. I'm just gonna probably, for most of us, like think about your maybe parents, brother. I always use my parents have still to this day no idea what I do for a living. They know nothing about science, nothing. So like if they get what I'm trying to say, it's like, cool, like I did a good job. Those types of people are most of the people out there, right? They don't understand the really technical aspects of science, but if this has come in like a Nat Geo magazine or a newspaper, something like that, like everyone's just gonna like take your word for it. So there's that. Or you have a really, really like mad sciencey type of academic that just is like too smart for everybody and just like wants to prove that they're like crazy smart, which happens a lot. Trust me, like coming from UCLA, there's tons of people there that do that. And so they just want to show you like all the crazy things, but they just do a really bad job at trying to get their message across. So, be aware of that. A lot of times, like, if you see this and it's in like a technical article, if it's in Nature, if it's in Science, it's probably the latter, right? It's probably that really, really fancy scientist that has a really new fancy program and wanted to play around with it. If it's in Nat Geo or if it's in a newspaper where it's going to more general public, they're probably trying to scramble your brain a little bit. And
Middle finger, trying to give you the middle finger.
Yeah, so think about that when you're reading these things.
Cool. All right. Oh yeah, Ryan.
One final thing, black text on dark blue.
Yes.
They intentionally made it
Yeah.
readable.
Right here in particular.
Really
Yep.
small.
Yeah, totally. And I would also say that our general rule is going to be when you guys are creating stuff. We'll go over this more later, but the general idea is that you would print it up on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and look at it, or you would look at it, full size on your computer screen. That's the thing that we're looking at. Someone could say, "Oh, this was supposed to be the size of a building, right? We're going to print this up and mount this on a building." In which case, maybe you'd be able to read the letters. But again, for our purposes, we're assuming we're looking at a piece of paper, we're looking at our computer screen, and the whole figure is fitting on there. So this is definitely too small to read for our sort of default formatting standards. Great. All right, cool. All right, good. You guys starting to get into it? Build those muscles, right? All that kind of good stuff. So awesome. So I think, do we want to pivot to talk about Excel?
So, yeah.
Okay.
You take, you want to do like a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Let's do like a 5-minute break.